see what it's doing. Okay, I got it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Well, we're both joining you today. We want to talk about the book, The 5 Levels of Attachment, that Richard's been mentioning these last 2 Sundays, and really bring it into our lives as to how we can
Recognize
incorporate,
it.
yes, and take some action on these steps. Okay?
Sure. As some of you know, and if you don't, I'll catch you up, is that the first Sunday of the year we talked about the idea of that our perceptions limit our potential. That what we perceive, in many cases, is an illusion, is not really the truth of who we are. Instead, what we perceive is what somebody's told us we should be like. And it's those perceptions of not being enough, those perceptions of I'm just, not all that I should be, those perceptions of I'm not living life the way I was taught. So I'm out of sync. I'm wrong. I'm dejected. I'm depressed. It's those kinds of perceptions that limit our potential of being everything we can be and even more. Then, last week we talked about the dream of the planet. The dream of the planet, in essence, is what millions of people before us have created as the way we should be, the way we should act, our moral values, our systems of being in life itself. And what happens is when we live that dream of the planet, we do it by looking at ourselves from the perspective of, are we following the rules that I've been taught through life? And when I'm not following those rules, then what happens? I judge myself, I become the jury, I become the prosecutor, and I feel all out of alignment. And I can never feel that I am enough. And it's that dream of the planet that keeps us thinking we are unworthy rather than worthy. And so Vicki knows a lot more about attachments than I do, because she's aware of them and I'm not. So she's going to talk a little bit about attachments and the process behind it.
Well, I think the main thing is to understand how this author, John Miguel Ruiz Jr., looks at attachments. He comes from a Toltec tradition, Toltec meaning artist. And this tribe, Toltec tribe, comes out of South Mexico from about 900 AD. They were a warring tribe. And they had many conquests and spent years being the best warriors. Until after one major battle, when the whole tribe began to examine what they were doing in terms of warfare. And at that point, I'm not sure at what point in their history that they made a shift, but they shifted from war to peace. They began to show us how to make a transformation in a culture where they decided that they would look at their behaviors in terms of their levels of attachment and how they began to move away from what they were calling their authentic core or their authentic self. So they have developed over this thousands of years, maybe 1,400 years or so, this philosophy, this wisdom, that now we can take our 5 principles in unity and superimpose these 5 levels of attachment so we can begin to grow in the wisdom where we all start off at the same place, that there is a divine essence, that there is a higher power, and we can then look at ways that we can stay connected to this higher power. So they begin to see attachments as being the problem where we were right and the other was wrong. Or because of the past, then we acted in the present based on what had happened in the past. And as they began to examine and come up with their new philosophy, it was all about releasing the past, releasing being right, and staying in a neutral place. Simply to say, This is the what is, and now what do I do with it to stay in a place of peace? Now, in the fall, Richard and I went to hear this author, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. He was at the Alchemist bookstore at Stony Point, gave a presentation on the book, in which time we knew we wanted to bring it to you for us all to share this wisdom, and I think it is absolutely excellent. Again, as Richard is describing the problem of our own perception and our own domestication, we then can say we start from a level 1 of being true to our divine self and being nurtured by this entire universe. It's a womb-like experience. And then as we become more fixed in our perceptions or in what we've learned from our family of origins, we begin to move away from this authenticity into other levels. And so by the time we reached level 5, we have become pretty serious and almost dangerous. So Richard, why don't you take us through these levels and lay them out for us?
Sometimes real dangerous, okay? The 5 levels will come up on the screen. They also are in your bulletin. And the 5th level, and I'm going to move from 5 to 1, is all about the idea of fanaticism. There is a question that his grandmother, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr.'s grandmother, asked him. And she's asked him, is knowledge controlling you, or are you controlling knowledge? You may want to write that down. Is knowledge controlling you, or are you controlling knowledge? And in the fanaticism stage, my knowledge controls my every action. I am really caught up in the dream of the planet. I don't believe that young babies, if they were able to raise themselves, would become terrorists. I don't believe that young babies, if they raise themselves, would become racist. I don't believe that young babies, if they raise themselves, would be anti-gay. I believe if they raise themselves, in the purest sense, they would not be attached to those ideas and those thoughts. Those are other people's ideas and other people's thoughts. And so the idea of fanaticism is that we take action based on what we have internalized, based on a belief system that has been created for us. And the action we take can be harmful to others. It's my way or the highway is a form of fanaticism, even if you say it. And I used to tell my employees that sometimes, because I was fanatically attached to the way I taught. And I knew there couldn't be a better way. But there always is a better way to learn and to grow. And so this idea of fanaticism, we see it in recent history. We've seen it through the last numbers of years as it's grown. In the idea of terrorists, we know that in France recently, that Charlie Hebdo, which is the French publisher that does caricatures of various religious leaders, not just Muhammad, but in case of Muhammad, Muslims got really upset, the terrorist Muslims, those who were fanatical, and they killed 17 people in France. Now, what came from that was quite wonderful, in that 3.5 million people, they estimate, in France demonstrated against terrorism. And when 0.5 million people demonstrate in a country, it says to me that the country is going to take this idea of protecting their citizens a lot more seriously. But hopefully, not seeing them as truly an enemy, but seeing each of them as opportunity of beholding what we call the Christ in them, their divinity. As hard as that is to do. But a fanatic would not do that in any case. You see, when we're a fanatic, we will do anything to protect our position or demonstrate our belief. People who are opposed to abortions, we know that the fanatical group in that group, there aren't many, thank goodness, but they've killed the doctors. They've assassinated doctors over abortion because they believe it so strongly and they become a fanatic to it. They can't think for themselves really any longer. And so what we know is that if we're not careful, we can move into that 5 level of attachment. And sometimes we're brought up, as I related, into it. Now, the next, and in that attachment, again, it says that my knowledge controls my every action. Now, the next level, number 4, is the level of internalization. Now, internalization can lead to fanaticism, but it doesn't have to. And what internalization says, my knowledge gives me the rules and guidelines for living my life. I may not impose them on others, but I'm not going to deal with people who don't think like I do. It means that I take on the banner that my religion is the only right religion, that my God is the only right God, that my belief systems are the only right belief systems, that my political views are the right political views, and nobody else has an opinion as far as I'm concerned. That I can treat people and see people, may not treat them that way, but see people from a racist perspective, from a judgmental perspective, because you're not like I am. Families can do that. A family can all disagree with each other in the immediate family, argue with each other, cry together. But if somebody else steps in and says, oh, I disagree with what you agree with, the family will all of a sudden band together. They're tight-knit, you see, because they've internalized the family belief. And I'm not criticizing them, I'm just saying what happens. The real question is, as I grow up into adulthood, was my family right? Did I learn the right thing? And how can I break loose of that if it's not right for me? And so we work through this idea of internalization. What happens is we look into the mirror of life and we see ourselves not as whole, but we see ourselves as broken. We see ourselves, again, as not enough. But I'm not willing to take action on it, let's say. I'm not willing to go out and inflict harm on somebody else. But I still feel that way. And with internalization, if we're not careful, you see, we may not agree totally with what's going on in society in given situations, but we're willing to be silent, and in being silent, we condone it and support it. For example, in Selma, I just saw the movie, great movie, brought back a lot of pain. Well done. And what happened is, and Martin Luther King talks about this in his letter from Birmingham jail, is that those who are silent and not saying anything are supporting that which is not in the highest and good for others. They have internalized it, but they don't want to take action on it. Okay? That's why in the South, during the days of slavery, when the argument was going on, many, many churches in the South supported slavery. They were no longer interested in what God saw. They were more interested in what they wanted, and they took the societal belief and moved it, political beliefs, and moved it over into their religious belief. And that still goes on today. And so we have to be careful not to internalize, if you would, what the world says we should be like.
Because, Richard, that is just that symptom of domestication or collective consciousness that we need to examine, just examine and examine.
Absolutely. And it's
How
always.
attached are we to these ideas?
Thank you. Always. Martin Luther King says we have internalized our belief and imposed our negativity into our religion. I hope that doesn't happen at Unity. But it could. If we start to think we're the only way, if we think we got all the truth because we are truth seekers, if we think we know all the answers and start to impose unity belief on that, then in some kind of way we start to internalize what we're believing because of the knowledge, not because of who and what we truly are, not because we are spiritual beings. See that difference? And we just have to be aware of it. And then The next thing is I identify myself with my knowledge. I identify myself with my knowledge, and that's identity, the third level. First level, fanaticism, or fifth level, fanaticism. Fourth level is internalization. And then this third level is identity. And in his book, he used a sports metaphor. He used soccer. And he let us know right away that in the whole world, they call it football, but in the United States, it is soccer. Okay? Don't get them mixed up. And anyway, what he used is he said, if you go in and you're supporting a particular team and you go to a sports event and you really get involved with that team, you will wear their colors. You will support that team. You will identify with that team. And in some cases, not all, because most of us know that Mike identifies with LSU. Right? So, Mike, this is not personal, okay? Because I know you know the difference. But anyway, we can identify with the team to the degree when the team loses, we leave the stadium upset. We are angry. And the next day, because we're still upset about it, we have a bad day at work. And because we have a bad day at work, when we go home, we're going to have a bad evening at home. Mm-hmm. It just adds. If you are identifying with that team that way. And so what we want to do is move to a different level than that. And just remember that we can use that in a different way. Because we can say in identity, without my job title, I am nobody. Because I don't belong to the country club, I am nobody. Because I got to get married no matter what, the way society says I should be married, I'm nobody. And boy, was that ever imposed on the gay community, the lesbian community. That's why they called it coming out of the closet. And what courage folks have had to be authentic that way. And so I can simply say, if my team wins, I win. If they don't, I lose. That's the identity process. Then there is the second step, and it says preference, that I have a preference for attachment. Each of these are levels of attachment. That I use my knowledge as a tool for engaging in life's preferences. Don Miguel Ruiz gave a great illustration. He was a Chargers fan, okay? I mean, he still is, no doubt about that. Oh, are you ever identity conscious? Okay, no, anyway. Anyway, and he said one day he was watching the game, and he was listening, and then the sound went out. So he said, I think I'll just continue watching, even though the sound's gone out, and just see what the experience is like. So he didn't get really upset about it. Well, initially he said he didn't get upset about it. And then he started to watch the game for about a half an hour. And he found that as he watched the game for half an hour, that he started to take on and more identify with what was happening in the game and the action of the game, rather than identifying with the Chargers. That he could see good moves and see moves that were mistakes in the game, and he could be more clear and more objective about it. And the way he came to find that out is the sound came back on. Then he started to dawn on him that the narrators were telling him what to think. This was a good play, this was a bad play. Mm-hmm. This guy's a bum, this guy's a great guy. They don't say it quite that way because they get fired, but they say it, And so, he that kind of thing. So all of a sudden he found that he was identifying with the narrators who were favoring the Chargers. And that he was no longer, that he was having a preference, if you would. But when there was silence, interesting concept, that there was authenticity. You see, a person can go to a sporting event and choose to support a team by choice, even if they don't know it. They like the color, they like the way the guys look, they act, they like the coach, whatever it happens to be. And the person can go to the game and choose to have that preference, meaning that I'm becoming engaged with what's happening in the present moment. But somebody with preference, where they've chosen what it is that they want to let themselves go with, also has the ability to withdraw from it. So when the game's over, the game is over. And I had a great time because I was rooting for a team. I got all the energy of it. Now, Mike Shelton was I don't know why I keep talking about him today, but I'm going to. Mike Shelton was very kind to give me tickets to VCU. And I got to be honest with him. I was actually rooting for both teams. I really liked it when VCU was just moving along and it looked like they could win the game. And I liked it when Virginia was moving along. So if somebody's doing something really well, I think what I really like is the fact that they're doing well. I'm not sure I was involved in the teams. But basically, now if University of Richmond had been there, it would have been different. But anyway, you see, I could be more neutral, if you want to call it that, and I could enjoy it. But I didn't leave thinking, oh, geez, VCU lost. I am so upset about that. Could you believe those bums, how they played today? The coach didn't call the right thing. The referees were terrible. Okay? You ever done that before in a game? No, not Unity, folks. So anyway, we get all involved in that. And then we move from that preference where I make a choice to be in the moment and make a choice to step out of it and be authentic. And that's the authentic self. It says, I am a living being regardless of my knowledge. Knowledge exists because I exist, not to guide or direct me or make me think I am something different than I am. I am a spiritual being. I am unattached to outcome events. I am neutral. Things are just the way they are. We live in the isness of life. It just is. It just is. And we move into that, you see, life becomes more of a wonderful experience. Because all the stuff doesn't limit me to enjoy all that life is. In the Course in Miracles this morning, we talked about neutrality. That I want to become neutral. That does not mean, nor does spiritual authenticity mean that I don't care, mean that I'm indifferent. It basically means that I am now able, because I am spiritually oriented, because I'm totally awake, I'm able to have compassion, I'm able to demonstrate unconditional love, I'm able to step into the midst of what's going on and not become a part of it.
So you're really talking about that last level,
I
which
am.
is the first level.
Self-authenticity, number one. Thank you. And so just remember that we have a spiritual opportunity to be aware of the level we are in and in certain situations, that we become aware. You know, if I'm moving into fanaticism because of one thing I believe, we can do that. Am I more individualized in what I believe in my life? Or am I a free thinker? Am I identifying with something? Or do I identify with something because it's a preference, because I choose to, and it doesn't have control over me? And then, you see, when I do that, I can move into and be in that self-awareness at all times. There are three things that we can do that Unity teaches us. Number of things, but of the principles. One is when I find myself in one of those positions, and probably most people are in 3 and 4 a lot of the time. When I find myself in one of those positions, I choose my thoughts. I recognize that my thoughts are not the best they could be, and I choose to think differently, and I control the ability to think differently and use positive thoughts. I am able to use denials through the process of prayer and meditation. I can deny that something from the past, something I was taught, has any power over me. And when I wipe that out, then I can affirm the truth, as Jesus said. I am the truth. I am the way. That's what Jesus was teaching through this whole thing of attachments. We are one. We are not separate. I don't think Jesus, when healing, I don't think he went out. And I would guess that he put his hands on some people and they didn't heal. I doubt that Jesus had a bad day because of that. Amen. See, he understood. He was not attached to the outcome. It was up to the individual. So we have these thoughts. And so we use prayer and meditation. And then once we've done that, we start to discern what is ours to do, what action we need to take. Not because somebody said, I've got to take that action. Not because that's the way you do it. But then I can discern original ideas of how to take action that's going to make a difference in the world. How to be this church without walls. How to step out in the community and make a difference. How to stay in the community and make a difference as we support one another. Now, I know you want to talk now.
No.
Go for it.
Well, I was really just thinking along with you just how strong and powerful this community consciousness is, our family consciousness, all the values that we're given and all the shoulds and the oughts and things that we do in groups. And then to step back and to be authentic with oneself, it takes great strength. And when Katrina was singing this morning, Make Me Stronger, I really felt that. Stronger not in terms of overpowering anything, but just overpowering my own thoughts. Getting to the point where I can be clear and not pretend or tell myself lies, where there's no more illusion in my life, where I can really say, that's not in the highest and best interest for me. Or look at it in terms of who we are as a church or a culture and take steps to really be positive, practical, and progressive in everything that I do, all the thoughts that I think, all the action that I take. So when we are looking at these levels of attachment, I don't take them lightly. And I'm sure you're not taking them lightly either. You really see the difficulty. And isn't it fabulous that this Toltec tribe saw this? This is wisdom, and they have brought it now to us to use. And I value it so much that next Sunday, Richard, I'm hoping we can have some questions from you, and maybe we can have some discussion about how to operate with moving through these levels of attachment. And as you go through the week, think about it. So you can say, oh, I've always wanted to do it in this way, but my family's never done it in this way. But breaking free is what it's about. Moving to a place of calmness and peacefulness and serenity, that's what it's about. And like Debbie was saying earlier, if we know all that, why would we want anything different? But when we are caught up in the current of our society or family or what we tell ourselves, we're going to attach. And at that point, we can then step back and say, I have an opportunity now to move through it. And as Richard described, the tools we use is prayer, spiritual discernment, stopping, dropping within, and asking, what is mine to do? I think what I liked about the talk we had with Don Miguel Ruiz was that he uses analogies. And he says when we're in the fifth level of attachment and we're just fanatical about something, we're like a flower that's totally closed up. There's no sun, there's no light, it's in the dark. And as you and I began to examine our rigid thoughts and behaviors based on just what we've done in the past, we begin to see there are other ways that may be in our best interest, and we can just open like the petals of a flower. And we can see that in our own lives, can't we? How we can be happier, how we can be calmer, and just feel more beautiful. And the world is more beautiful when we come from that place. Here's a quote that he gives us to bring us into what it's really about, is being in a place of unconditional love for oneself, accepting all that we've said, done, all that we've thought, which may or may not have been in our best interest, and also to see and have this unconditional love for others. You know, we learn these commandments from Jesus, don't we? Love God, and love that God that's expressing in all creation and coming from us, and love your neighbor. And when we stop to think, then there would be no warfare. Then there would be total understanding and greater attempts to be at peace with one another. So I thought, Richard, what we do now is sing ourselves into some meditation. Was there anything else you wanted to share?
No, thank you. I think they've heard it all.
Okay?
All
right. So our song is going to be Our Thoughts Are Prayers.